Okay, good afternoon everybody. Mark Anderson, Director of Environment for ACMA. Association of Greater Manchester Authorities is the 10 local authorities that make up the Greater Manchester conurbation, the largest of which is Manchester City. My colleague Michael O'Doherty is the low carbon buildings lead for the hub, and he's going to be talking more about retrofit, but I really thought that it would be interesting to give you a little bit of background, a bit of big picture on what we're doing in this space and why, and then the logical flow through hopefully into why we're interested in retrofitting buildings. So, not big on a lot of detail, I'm not going to run through it all. Enough to say we have a climate change strategy, it's been agreed at the highest level with AGMA, and it's got a 48% carbon reduction target. 48% by 2020 compares to a UK target of 32% by 2020, means we've got quite a challenging target to meet. But we have 4 headline objectives. You see that? Again, won't do all of the detail, but it's around. Wherever I stand, something I'll lose out. It is around. I'll move around. It is around reducing carbon. It is about getting economic development, so it's about skills and jobs as well. It's about making sure that we adapt our city region to make sure that we are fit for purpose in the next 30 years, not just tomorrow. And to do that, we think we need to change the culture. We need to change the way that people, businesses and society work to make all of those other things happen. It's worth pointing out that 36% of our carbon emissions are from the domestic sector, directly relevant to housing. So what is the low carbon hub? And when I came today, I was really pleased just to come and listen. But when I started reading through the agenda, I thought, do you know, actually, is this an experiment? Or is it mainstream? And I don't know the answer, so your feedback on that would be really useful. I think personally that some of it's an experiment, and I think this bit is the experiment. I think some of the things we're going to present to you in the next 10 minutes or so are more mainstream. They're things that I would say are classic economic development theory, which may or may not go well in this audience, but I think that they are essential to try and deliver a low carbon economy across Greater Manchester. So this is the bit of the experiment, and we've developed a low carbon hub in response to the City Deal. City Deal was signed up by Greater Manchester last year. It basically said that we would do three things. Develop a low carbon hub to bring together all of our partners to work on the low carbon agenda. That's the private, the public, and indeed the third sector. My view is that we haven't engaged the third sector enough, and we're trying to readdress that now. So the central flower that you probably can't read, these are all of our resources, these are all our partners, including the universities, including the private sector, the local enterprise partnerships mentioned, Chamber of Commerce. These are all the people that we collect together to try and make this thing happen. We've set up these different groups. 4 of these groups represent the 5 themes in the climate change strategy. The other 2 are skills and sector development, and they're trying to pull out the economic benefit of the environmental low carbon work that we're trying to do. Importantly, we have a great relationship with our universities. We're fortunate in Greater Manchester. At least 3 of our universities have a total research spend of about £100 million on energy alone every single year. They have a USP in electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and indeed building technologies. So we have a bit of a USP in our academic sector. The Low Carbon Hub, in effect, is an engagement mechanism. It's a way to try and get people who want to work together on the same agenda, on the same topics, in the same room. And I think it's starting to work. We're about 12 months in, and we're already starting to see some really good projects coming through. Why are we doing it though? Well, partly because of this. This is our carbon target trend. We set a 48% carbon reduction target by 2020. We've also set an interim target by 2015, because we need to bring it back into line, bring it back into vision. And you can see that we've done okay. Bit of a dip here, largely down to recession and weather actually, so we can't claim that we've had a significant impact for our programmes right now. And this is sort of national data that was brought down to the Greater Manchester level, but it gives us enough confidence to show that we're going in the right direction. The difficulty is that all of the low-hanging fruit, all of this stuff up here is largely to do with the way the energy systems have been changed and the transfer from organic into less organic forms of energy production nationally. We're really into the difficult territory now of making significant difference. And we are in the territory of doing 2 things. Adding value to national programmes. We know that national programmes will probably deliver something like 75% of carbon reduction across Greater Manchester. So we need to add to that, see what we can bring in to take that value up from 75 to 85 or 90 even. And then there's a small amount, I think, that we will bring down into the local level. I've got to be careful what I say in that way, because it gives the impression that the local level isn't important. It is. It's just that a lot of the things that we do at the local level, when you use these metrics, will count towards the national. So my colleague's going to be talking about Green Deal in a minute. We're going to do a shell load of work on Green Deal, but it won't count towards the local level, it will count towards the national level. We will accelerate national progress. Why are we doing this? We are doing this for jobs. We are going to try and do this for jobs, at least. And so we need to define why we're doing it in this way. I don't know whether you can read this, but what it shows is these are all of the local enterprise areas across the UK. And Manchester is over here. In terms of the low carbon sector, the low carbon environment goods and services sector, we are placed third. We talk behind London and the South East. London we will never catch up with because a lot of the headquarters are there. So no matter how much activity goes on elsewhere in the country, it all goes through London books, and therefore disproportionately they look very large. But what it does show is that in terms of pounds, about £5.4 billion worth of turnover each year in Greater Manchester, 37,000 jobs. And we think our sector, we know our sector, is going to grow at least more than 4%, and we think it's hedging up to 5%. The national average is about 4.6%. So we're there or thereabouts in terms of national trend. And it's an important sector for us. Why? Well, we've done a bit of analysis to figure out where all these companies are. About 2,000 companies, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's around, it's about 2% of, has it moved on? It's got an automatic move on. About 2% of the number of businesses in GM, but when you take in the wider supply chain, when you look at the companies that could actually move into this sector, standard manufacturing companies that could move into the low carbon space, it goes between about 5% of companies and 7% of companies, which starts to get into really interesting numbers when you talk about job creation. These are our key areas currently. The axis along the bottom shows the number of companies. The axis along the side shows their potential for growth. And obviously what we're trying to do is move our companies into this top right-hand corner. And the ones that are already there, wind, building technologies, again, why are we focusing on retrofit? Because we've got a USP in that area. Also, we've got some USP in energy management. And some of these companies need to migrate this way. So the idea is, for the companies that are already there, you're trying to increase their export potential, you're trying to increase investment, whether that's possible or not. You're trying to get more businesses to come into these areas to grow the sector. And one of the ways we can try and do that is by creating market demand, and that's what my colleague's going to talk about in a minute. Also, what we're trying to do though is take some of these companies and move them this way. And the way to do that is through market creation. So how are we going to create the market? This data is a little bit outdated, it's about 12 months out of date, but we did an analysis of what do we think our low carbon assets are, potential low carbon assets across Greater Manchester. We came up with a value of about 700 million. And when we de-risked that and put in feasibility factors, it came down to about 320 million, which is still a sizable proportion of expenditure in this space. And we've done some work with Green Investment Bank to try and quantify how local authorities in particular, but the wider GM family, can try and support the development and delivery of these projects. Why? Because this creates the market. And you'll see that about 50% of this graph is on energy efficiency, particularly energy efficiency in buildings, including some photovoltaics. We've also focused on heat networks in terms of potential, and street lighting is something that we're focusing on as well. And in terms of our first wave of projects, we think we've got about £80 million worth of non-domestic energy efficiency, about 20 million in wave one, street lighting at about 51 million, that's 6 authorities, and heat networks a minimum 24 million, that's only for 3 projects, we think it will be probably a lot more than that. My colleague's also going to talk about domestic retrofit, and that's another 70 million on top that was excluded from this graph. If we can undertake this exercise, if we can put more money into investing in our infrastructure, not only will it make us a more sustainable city for the next 30 years, hopefully, but it will create both short and long-term jobs to try and support our sector to grow, and hopefully once it's grown, export some of its expertise overseas. So we have an investment strategy. Again, won't go through the whole detail, but what it basically talks about is setting up an investment vehicle, focusing on place, so basically investing in our infrastructure, particularly focusing on buildings, for the reasons I've stated about USB, but importantly, putting alongside that a business support program that does 3 things actually. It supports businesses who aren't currently in the space to eco-innovate into that sector. That's the first. It supports businesses across all sectors to decarbonise, so energy efficiency, resource efficiency support to business. And then there's a small program which is sector development, which is really about trying to encourage businesses to grow through a variety of different means, but particularly about business-to-business interaction, which some points from Enfield talked about earlier. But that's just the low carbon priority. The other priorities in the investment strategy around creating competitive places, making sure that we exploit as best we can our science, innovation and knowledge economy, and creating competitive business, making sure that skills and employment meet our demand, and then looking after social inclusion and reform to try and get greater equality and sharing of that wealth. I think this is my last slide. So this is a picture that just tries to put all of that into context and to give you one thing to take away. In effect, what we're trying to do is create more jobs, create new companies and increase exports. Why? Because it will help to grow our sector, or our sector will help to deliver that if we can grow it. How are we going to do it? Invest in low carbon infrastructure, invest in buildings in particular, and support our SMEs to innovate and to become more resource efficient. These, in effect, will deliver our carbon and cost savings, develop new products, and deliver some energy security. But to join these two things together, we need to put some enablement in. And the enablement is creating a financial vehicle and making sure that our low carbon skills, the people that we want to go into this sector, are skilled enough to be able to deal with the demand that we believe will come. I'm going to pass it to Michael, and if there's any questions, we'll take them.
Afternoon, everyone, and I will be. You want to take questions now? I will be very brief. As Mark's already alluded to, we've got two main programmes around the retrofit agenda that I'm going to talk to you about. Housing, 10 authorities recognising that on its own the market is not going to deliver against the carbon targets that we've set, and we know to hit our 2020 and 2050 targets we've got a clear trajectory in terms of what we need to do to the housing stock in GM. It's currently at a very low average D and EPC rating, if you know what that means. We need to get it up here to a high level of B by 2030, 2035. And anyone that knows anything about homes and making them energy efficient, particularly in the UK and Greater Manchester, that's a massive challenge. So we've got to try and drive the market, but clearly we'll focus today on the economic aspects of that. But in terms of the aspects of the market, one is around insulation, Green Deal and eco. The government isn't helping at the moment because there's a lot of uncertainty around that market. So again, the local authorities have quite a strong role to play, city kind of critical mass to work with partners. And I'll talk about what we're doing in GM in a moment. But also developing work around behavioural change and engagement, marketing, and how we bring in third sector communities, crucially important, and also creates economic opportunities. And then looking forward, one eye on the future, on renewable technologies, other technologies that we can help to be demonstrating now, we can help to be thinking about future local economic growth. This slide basically tries to summarise what we're doing around Green Deal and eco right now. I'm concerned about using the term Green Deal because already I think it's slightly tarnished. Our point is that Green Deal is a pay-as-you-save mechanism. There's no way nationally we're going to get our homes retrofitted to the standard that's needed unless we can unlock investment in those homes through people's own resources, and the pay-as-you-save model works. So the Green Deal is the current model. It may change over the next few years, but the view is that a version of pay-as-you-save with some kind of support, which is currently eco, will be in place for whatever political party over the next 5 to 10 years at least. And that's really important because unless there's that kind of confidence in the market, none of this is going to happen. So again, the cities have a role. Core cities, we work with core cities, we work with the GLA as well, to try and give government some confidence that these things are going to happen. We are currently procuring our delivery partners. We'll make an announcement in January in relation to 3 Green Deal provider partners, the framework, Green Deal accredited, so big organisations. One of the questions could be, how do we make sure that there's a local benefit in there? Well, the whole procurement process that we've been through is about ensuring that the local supply chain is engaged. As part of that, there's the formal supply chain, there's the assessors, there's the installers, but there's also the opportunities of helping to explore the opportunities for local companies, for third sector organisations. We talked before about housing providers. Loads of opportunities for them in terms of their own right, because they're doing really good work around energy efficiency in GM at the moment, and we're working closely with those. But the opportunities to cross over public and private, areas, and social housing providers have a role to play in there. In GM, we have an advice service that we've retained, formerly the old STAC, Energy Saving Trust Advice Service, and that's our kind of hub that links back in the kind of consumer demand, marketing, and understanding, you know, the issues we're going to have in relation to persuading households to take this up. And we do have a slide on that, and I'm aware that time is running out. But ultimately, unless we get households to actually want to do this, then there is no economic development, there's no growth. And I think this is the big issue for us. There is carbon literacy is a GM behavioural change programme that we're looking to drive as part of that. But also we're looking at how we can use incentives and rewards and develop a network of community show homes and demonstration homes. Crucially important if we're going to get people to take this risk, this next step. We've moved away from the easier, familiar loft and cavity insulation into much more difficult measures. Just in terms of the journey we've taken in terms of housing programmes to get to where we are, we're about to have our Green Deal programme for the next 3 to 5 years. But we're also linking that in with work with fuel poverty and making sure we can bring in other funding sources such as health funding in there as well. And just to finish off, Mark mentioned local authority buildings. Potentially this is a major opportunity that could be emulated by other areas, but GM does have the advantage of 10 local authorities working together. So we've got a potential, as Mark says, £20 million investment project that could make collectively across 300 plus buildings savings in the region of 38 to 40 million as a minimum over a 12-year period. And that's if we aggregate the way the local authorities work together and go for deeper energy savings. Coming back to Mark's initial trajectory, if we don't get our public buildings in order, we're not then in a strong position to play our leadership role with the commercial sector as well. So this is really important for us to get our own buildings in a fit, energy efficient state, but then to be able to play a much stronger role looking at finance opportunities and routes of support to enable work in the commercial sector. I'll leave it there. Thank you.